Today's video. So in the last video, we designed our pop-up where we were giving user the options to select the language, English or Hindi, in which like we are supporting basically two languages for this particular app. And we already did localization in the beginning, but that localization was completely based on what is the system language of your phone. Let's say that if my phone was having English language, so my app will show English. If my phone is having Hindi language, then it will show Hindi, right? But today what we are going to do, we are going to give user to change the language from the app itself. And this is different than what we did earlier because that was based on your phone language, and this will be completely based on your app language setting. Like even if your phone is in English, and if I select Hindi from my app, then my app should display Hindi. And the other thing what I want to achieve in this, like in most of the app, what you have noticed that the language changes on the go. Like for example, if I select Hindi, I don't need to kill the app and restart the app to change everything in the Hindi, because that will give a bad user experience here. Because if you see this is a pop-up screen and I want to take the user to the home page. So if I kill it again, he has to, maybe like I have to show the onboarding screen again or some sort of hack to take the user to dashboard. So I want to change it on the fly. Okay, so let's do this. So what we have to do first, let's create a class called language setting, and we'll use this as a environment object as a local, so that once we change the language and once your local is changing in the environment object, it will get affected immediately in all your views. Okay. Okay, so I have this class here and I want this class to be of type observable. Okay, now inside this I'll take a variable local, okay, which will be of type local, and by default the value will be current. Okay, current means whatever your phone setting is there. If your phone is English or Hindi or any other language, based on that it will choose the local value. Okay, so okay, now I also want to have here a did set, and we'll implement it little later. Okay, after this what we have to do, let's go back to our main class, the root view, which is Bhagavad Gita app, and here let's declare that property. So at the rate state where language setting. Okay, and this will be passed to both the view as an environment object, so that we can access down the hierarchy. Okay, so environment pass language settings, and the second thing we'll set is a local in the environment. Okay, so environment, and this is a predefined thing, so local, and this value will be again language settings dot local. Okay, and I'll just copy these two things. Okay, so it is giving me error. Okay, this has to be environment, and it's want this to be 17. So let's change the target to 17. So it is right now 16.2. Just change to 17.0. Anywhere else we need to change? No, it's fine. Okay, so now the error should go away after we run it. And the same thing what I will do, I'll copy and paste it here. Okay, so now what we are doing, we are setting the local here based on whatever the like user is choosing. Okay, now what we need to do next is that when you tap on this button, we have to change this language settings, right? So let's go back to our get started pop overview, and here let's create an environment object. So language setting dot self. Just copy and paste this. Okay, so whenever the user taps the button, what is going to happen, this selected index is going to change. Okay, so what we can do, as this index might look like, if someone has to see the code 0 1, it will not make that much sense. So we can change this to a proper enum. Okay, so what I can do here basically is that define a enum with supported language. So our app is supporting two languages, right? And this is going to be case English and case Hindi. Okay, so now what we have to do, that this, instead of this going to be selected index, we can call it as selected language. That will make more sense. And instead of this having is 0, I can have the default value as English. Okay, now let's see how many more places we have to change it. So now again the same thing applies here. So now I'll just change this variables from index to language, and here as well, and this also becomes the selected language. What was the name? Supported language, sorry. Okay, now here we are changing the selected index equals to index. So let's try to change this index also. So what we can do here is, instead of index, we can again take current language. Okay, and this is going to be of type supported language, and what we can do is selected language equals to current language. Okay, I'm just removing this index funda so that it makes more sense what we are doing. Okay, and here also selected index, instead of selected index it will be selected language equals to current language. Okay, and this part looks good. Let's come here. So now we don't have index, we have basically the current language. So current language in this case it is English, and in this case the current language is Hindi. Okay, so this looks now better, that okay, this part is English, this part is Hindi. Now we have to know how the user, when the user is changing the language, right? And that we can know through this selected language object. Okay, and we are already binding this because this variable is defined in our main view. So what we can do, we can just write a simple code to listen for that change. So on change of selected language, so we can just perform some action. Okay, and what we have to do, we have to set the language which is there in our local. Okay, so language setting, what we need to do is language setting dot locale. Now here basically what we have to do, we have to form our local, right, based on what the user has selected. So whether you have selected English or Hindi, based on that this actions has to be changed. Okay, so what we can do, we can go to our this language settings, and here we can write a function set locale, and this will assert basically a language which is of type supported language, and here we can write switch. So if it is dot Hindi, then we have to write locale equals to locale, and you have to provide identifier. So for Hindi it is HI. Okay, and we also have English, and in this case now English has multiple types, like we have EN, IN, like in English India, English UK, English US. I'm just taking EN. Okay, so this function is done. So now what we need to do basically is that whenever this is going to change, we have to call set local, and we can just pass the new value. Okay, and we don't need old value, so we can just replace with underscore as we are not using it. Okay, so now let's run it and see if it's changing our language or not when we change from English to Hindi. Okay, so now this is English. So what I'm going to do is go here, select Hindi. These things are not changing, but if you see here, this is changing to Hindi and not again this buttons. Okay, if I go back again and change, and again, because see, by default every time when you come to this what you call get started pop overview, the language we are initializing default English. So right now we are not respecting the selected language, so that will come later. But now you can understand why it is again English even if the local is Hindi right now. So I'm setting it to Hindi and again back to English so that it reflects, and now you can see that everything is in English. But what's the reason that this is changing and this is not changing? Let's first see that. Okay, so if I go back to my, this is basically our onboarding interior view, right? So if you see this, we are loading through a model which is again internally talking to our localized string key. So here we are not using that third-party library that we are using SwiftGen. Like for example, if I go back to onboarding view, if you see here the text that we are reading it from L10N, and this was respecting the language that was being set by phone. Okay, now let's do one more thing here, is that here if I click on edit schema, and you see the app language is system language and this is system, so this looks cool. Okay, this should be system language, not English, so this looks fine for me. Let do one thing, instead of reading it through this class and all this thing, because what is it's doing, it is reading you from the phone local. Okay, and we are not changing the phone local in this process. What we changed, basically we created a local variable inside a class and we are modifying that. So at the time of initialization of our app, whatever the app, whatever the phone language is there, it is working on based on that. So what we can do, or we can try at least, is that let's search this, and this is basically onboarding script. So instead of using this through that, let's use it through direct string, so that now it should respect our local this local that we are setting in the app. Okay, because that is what will come from the environment object, and that where we are setting it in our root view. So if you go here, so this should respect this particular change. Okay, so we did it for script. Let's make it to next, and we also have get started. Let it run again, and this time what it shows. Remove this warnings. Okay, now if you see that every time when you run the app, because it will take your current local, and your current local is English right now, because my phone language, if you see, this is English. Okay, and if I come back again here and click on get started, now this time if I'm changing to Hindi, you see that everything got changed. Not this part, because I think I missed to change this radio button text. So if you see this one, this I missed, so let me change this as well. So this is English and this is Hindi. Okay, so now on the fly is working fine. If I select Hindi, see everything is getting converted to Hindi. But the only problem is that next time when we run the app, it is not choosing Hindi the language, it is again setting it to default to phone language. Okay, now how to solve that one? So to solve that issue, what we have to do, we have to come back to our language setting class that we created. Okay, now here if you see what is happening, whenever you run the app and this class is getting initialized for the first time, what we are doing, we are reading the value of current. Okay, and if you go to this definition, if you see, returns the user current local. Okay, current local of the phone. Now what we can do when we are see other, now there are two things, like if you go through the documentation, we have one key which is Apple languages, that is the actually the key where the locales are stored. Either we can modify that, or you can take your own custom key or custom user default key to remember this, that okay, what's the language that user has selected. Okay, so what I'm doing here, that let's say that here I write a init method here. Okay, and I want to call a function which will basically set up my initial local. So let's say that private function setup initial local. Okay, and how the logic should do in this case. So first thing is that you should read the language that is there in your what do you call for example, what you have set. Let's say that if I have set it using a value called language key, so let's say that if let language equals to user defaults dot standard, okay, instead of writing it here, I can just create a enum constants, and can write here case language key, which is going to have this as value, and this will have a string. Okay, so that we can use it inside here instead of hard coding it all the places. Is it giving any error? Like this. Okay, so now I'm just removing this with constant dot language key. Now what is this basically user default that I have created? So what I'm going to do, that whenever you are going to select either English or Hindi, that option I'm going to store in the user default in this particular key, so that next time when you launch the app, I can read from the key and remember what is your last selected option. Okay, so if your value exists, so if your value exists, then what you have to check, that what is the value. So we are going to save either Hindi or English, right? Because that's the two options that we are giving here. So we can write if, and again what we can do is, where we have defined our get started pop-up view, that is this also we can make it to a string and have a value, so that will save the same value here also. Okay, so here we'll form the basically our enum property. So let, or we can write one more here inside this if let only, let value equals to supported language, and then we can pass the raw value as English or whatever the language that you are receiving from here. Okay, so set local language is going to be your value. Okay, so the code runs, it calls this class is initialized, and it calls your initial local setup. And what the initial local setup will do, that it will read your value from your language key, convert that to proper value or proper enum object, and then set your local. Now once your class loads, first time the value of local will be current, but as we are calling this in the init, so the moment after this function is going to call, it's going to change either to English local or going to change to Hindi local. Okay, now we have to also handle the else scenario. Now what is the else scenario? Here it is. When you are launching the app for the very first time, in that case the app will not know about any value, because this will come into the picture only when you select either you come to this page, right? What if you are a first time user or you deleted the app and you install again, right? So in that case it should have a fallback scenario. Okay, and what should be the fallback scenario? In that case we have to read the languages from the what do you call, from the phone, like what is the phone settings language, like, and in your phone you could have multiple language. Let's say that what if this app is being used in a phone where the language is set to French. Now my app doesn't support French, right? So in that case I cannot set the local to French, because it might start failing other thing. So we have to handle using a fallback scenario. So first thing what we are going to do here is that, let's say that here let's read the languages from the key which is called Apple languages, and that is being maintained by the Apple, like whatever the language based on your phone, it will give you the value. So we'll call it as languages equals to, and this gives you array of value. Like in your phone you can have 2-3 different languages also at one point of time, and like for example in my case, if I go to language here, what happened, it's not loading. Yeah, so if I go to general and language and region, if you see that I have 2 preferred language, that means that in my case when I write this code, user defaults dot standard dot array for key, and this key is again Apple languages, so let me define that key also here. So just make sure that you don't make any spelling mistakes here, because this is a standard text. So here key is constants dot Apple languages dot raw value. Okay, in the else case I'll return. So generally you will not get else case, because user will always have at least one language selected here. Okay, now once you get the value, what you have to do, you have to take the first language, because if you see in this case I'll get the value as EN and HI, but what is my first language here? That is English, and that's the reason that you are seeing everything in the English here. So we should consider about the first language. So we can write let current language equals to languages dot first as a string. So now I got the first language code. That means in this case I'll receive most probably en hyphen in. Okay, now after that what you have to do, again the same thing that we did where here. So based on your, we have to convert this to a proper value. But again here in this case, what's the problem? It can happen that because our supported language is just expecting two tests, English or Hindi, so I'm not going to write convert this to supported language. See that, let me just write a simple if else condition, because I just have to handle two conditions, that if the user has Hindi as a first language, so Hindi. In the other case I just want to show English, no matter whatever the language it is, because I'm just supporting two languages. So if current language dot contains simple text here, that is hi, that is Hindi. In the else case, whatever the language we are getting it from the Apple, we always have to no, set the local to English. Okay, so what I can do, I can set the local here. Now I have to create this value, so this value will be basically Hindi in this case, and this value will be English. Okay, okay, now we are missing one more thing, and what we're missing is that we also need to set that language to our local key, so that next time when you run it, it again don't go back to the same else condition, it should come to the if condition. So after setting, we also need to set our language key. That means what we can do is that in this case we have to set our user defaults okay, or what we can do, instead of setting it here, like I have to set it 2 times, I can set the local here as only, so that even when you are changing from English to Hindi, it is also changing your local key. So here user defaults dot standard, and what value you need to set here, that is supported language dot Hindi dot raw value, and key will be constant dot language key, right? And then let's save it. Dot language key dot, yeah, that's the value, no raw value. Okay, and copy and paste the same thing here. Okay, so now the flow looks good to me. I'll just go through once more. So this class initialized, set up the initial value. If you have already saved value, then respect your app saved language. If your app doesn't have saved language, that means it's a new app, in that case respect the phone language if you can, that means if you are supporting that language, otherwise set it default to English. Okay, and then whenever you are changing the local, then save again that value into your user defaults. Okay, so let's run this app again and see how it behaves. So we have to test in multiple scenarios, like I'll tell you the scenarios. So first thing is that we'll just run the app, and first time right now my app is in English, so it should display everything to me in the English. So you see this is working perfectly fine, and if I change something here, that means okay, something has gone wrong here, this with English and Hindi text. Let's first fix this. So go to get started, right? So here, so text, we are passing this particular key, and maybe here we have to use with localized, I think, and then the text. We run it again because we are not using the key directly. It is, so the app is considering it as a string value, so that may be the reason. Okay, so now we selected Hindi last time, so that's the reason that you are seeing everything in Hindi, and but this is still in English. Okay, so let's first fix that. Now here what we are doing, we are setting the value of this based on we are setting just a default value, like whatever the value it have, we are not respecting it, right? But how we can respect it? So what we can do is, I think, very simple, that whenever this view loads, we can write a onAppear function to change the language. So where is this v stack ending? It's ending here. So let's write onAppear here, and then here we have to set the selected language. Now how we can set the selected language? So it has to be again completely based on your you can say local, or you can say even the user defaults, anything whatever you want. So what I can do, I can write again here simple if else condition for a time being. Let's say that if my language settings dot local dot identifier dot contains honest, yeah, dot contains, that fine. So contain what? So if it contains Hindi, that means HI, then in that case obviously I think we can improve this part of code a little bit, then it looks that great to me right now, but we'll see later. So selected language equals to, what we can do, dot Hindi. In the else case we can write English. Okay, now let me run it once more, and this time it should respect the selected language selection, so whatever the user has selected. So it's not about just a selection, whatever the even the phone language if the user had not selected it. So now it's Hindi, perfect. I selected English, everything got changed to English on the fly. You don't need to kill the app. Okay, so this flow looks fine. Now what the next flow we can test is that, let's delete the app, and so right now the language is selected to English, right? Just now I saw it, so I just let me change it to Hindi. It will take some time. So now my language is Hindi. Now let's run the app again, and this time I should see for the very first time everything should be in Hindi, because you can see that everything is in Hindi, and your selection also by default here should be Hindi. Okay, now if I change it to English, again this should change it to English. Okay, now you can also taste it selecting any other language, like whichever region you are, like French or Chinese, anything, and that should change it to English, like as I'm not supporting that language. Okay, let's me do one more thing, is that we have to so here not here in the main flow we wrote this, right, is onboarding loaded equals to false. So now we also have to make it true, right? So what we can do, we can copy this, go to our get started pop overview, let it define here, and when you have to make it true, you have to make it true when this button let us go is tapped. So by default the value was false, so I'll make it true so that you should land to the home page, right? So let it test this flow as well. So the language should be still Hindi, because it's last time I changed it to Hindi only, the app sorry, the phone language. I selected English, and when I press OK, let's go, you can see that it came to the content page. Okay, So in the next video we are going to define how this content page or how this home page is going to look like. And yeah, that's all for today's video. Hope you have enjoyed and learned something new, how to manage the localization on the go apart from being handled directly from the app level. And if you really liked the video, then please do subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching. Thank you.